We wait here just for a moment while everyone joins us. Right. Well, Buona digon, buona gestai, croeso, Marioneth. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome from Wales, the southern edge of Marioneth, where I am sitting, as the dying embers of the day sort of cast a silver light over the middle of the Dovey Valley, which is what I'm looking out over. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined on this seminar by a group of experts, all of whom have experience of selling whales in one way or another. And I'm going to just introduce them very quickly. We've got Vera Lott, who is a director from the Tour Partner Group. Vera, do you want to say hello very quickly?
Hello, everyone. I'm Vera. I'm based in the UK, and I'm working for Tour Partner Group. And I'm looking after everything that's marketing, people, and CSR related. We are an inbound DMC, and I've been working with Claire for years already now and her team around the world. We sell to over 40 source markets, predominantly B2B, and yeah, I'm very happy and delighted to be here today. Thank you.
And I ought to say very, very kindly has stepped in at the last minute, because Karen Urban, who was advertised as taking part in this webinar, has unfortunately contracted COVID in Bavaria. Whether this is the currently fashionable Omicron strain or some Bavarian variant, we don't know, but she's not very well, and we really do wish her all the best, particularly if you're watching at the moment. Karen, she may indeed be watching. Adam, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Lottinger. I've just very recently retired from Mickey Travel after 39 years with the company, most of that in London, but 5 of those years also in Japan. Mickey Travel sort of specializes in both group and FIT. And of course, as part of UK, Wales was one of the destinations that we have promoted over the years and tried to sell. My personal background particularly was in the hotel side for many years, but most latterly I was a director on the board and ultimately the managing director. Recently retired at the end of July, as I said. So, thank you.
Yes, I think I would stress that Mickey are one of the giants of European wholesale travel, and they have a huge footprint in Asia, particularly in Japan. It's great to have you here, and thank you for breaking cover, Adam, in such a
My pleasure.
Our partner in this enterprise and in the Britain and Ireland marketplace, which is this event is partly to promote, is of course Joss Croft. Say hello, Joss.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Joss. I'm the Chief Executive of UK Inbound. We're a trade association that represents the interests of 300 businesses involved in selling the UK internationally. We work very closely with Visit Wales. We also work very closely with the partners on the call today, be that Tom through Britain and Ireland Marketplace, many other lobbying activities, or whether it be with Vera or Adam in terms of Mickey and Tour Partner Group as well. Prior to work at UK Inbound, I was the marketing director at Visit Britain, and obviously Wales formed a really important part of that portfolio. And I've worked with Claire and others on the call over many years, trying to get the destination onto must-see shortlist for any international arrival into the UK. So delighted to be here. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Joss. And Claire, I doubt if you need too much introduction to the current audience, but please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see so many people on this afternoon. So I'm Claire Dwight from Visit Wales. I lead the team that's responsible really for business-to-business marketing, particularly with the leisure travel trade. And you know, it's great to have the opportunity to work with our partners, ETOA and UK Inbound, as well as inbound operators, to sort of discuss really the opportunities that exist now for international into Wales.
Thank you. We've prepared a short sort of statistical rundown put together by David Edwards, formerly of Visit Britain, now of ETOA. And I will just try and share my screen very quickly to give you a quick insight as to what he has to say. I don't know, can you see that at the moment?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, just very briefly, David very kindly put this together. The figures here obviously largely come from Visit Britain and the International Passenger Survey. Sometimes they're open to question, but I think the general thrust of it is perfectly solid. We're looking very much at what the shape of inbound, that's very much foreign visitors coming to Wales, how many there are, and how many and what they do. And you'll see that the overnight inbound tourism to Wales in 2019 really was responsible for the best part of £500 million worth of spending, and that is a very significant sum of money. Nothing like as big as the spend by domestic visitors in Wales, those people coming in from England chiefly. Nevertheless, represents nearly 2 million nights and the best part of 400,000 visits just on the leisure side. If you then look at what the pattern of this has been in terms of visits and spend over the last years, you see that it's been consistently rising. There was a dip in 2017, which was recovered from in 2019, but what we don't have, of course, is the subsequent really crash that's occurred in inbound tourism in 2020 and 2021. If you look at what the most important markets are, unsurprisingly, Ireland features extremely strongly, not least because two of the most important ferry routes coming from Ireland into the United Kingdom go through Wales. And I think you'll also find, if you look at the USA figures, that a large proportion of the USA volume is slightly hypothecated around, though Claire may wish to correct me on this if I'm wrong, is slightly hypothecated around the fact that many Americans are travelling through Wales either to get to or from Fishguard and Holyhead. And the two great corridors running along the south and north of the country are largely responsible for the big figures that you see in the first two chunks. The good news is that Vera is here also to tell us about Germany in a second. So to a certain extent, we have these markets 2 and 3 covered. Source markets mix in regional England, just to see how, is there any difference to what happens in Wales to the rest of England? The answer is, in terms of mix, there's very little difference. I mean, you'll see that regional England gets about sort of 10% of its volume from the Asia Pacific. You get 12%, which is in some ways surprising, but broadly, 70% of the traffic comes from Europe, and broadly 13% of the traffic comes from North America. The only big difference here, and it is obviously very significant, is that the volume of people going to regional England and Wales is remarkably different. I mean, I think there are probably 17 times the number of people going to regional England than there are to Wales. But to put that in context, the population of regional England is probably 15 times that of Wales. So it's not surprising that there's this huge disparity in volumes. The top towns, I think you probably don't need to be told this, but you'll see that a lot of what drives this is availability of accommodation, and the accommodation is largely predicated on the existence of business and business hotels for leisure tourists to stay in. But again, I don't think anybody would be surprised by this huge overpreponderance of Cardiff, but Cardiff has most of the hotel rooms. And that's it from me. Now, Claire, you've got a few things to say. Can I transition into your presentation?
Yes, please, if you're able to bring that onto the screen, Tom.
I'll do what I can. Can you see that?
Yeah, if you're able. Yeah, yes, that's great. Thanks, Tom. Well,
tell me when you want to do.
Okay, so I'm going to follow on from the research slides which Tom has run through with a few more general insights in a moment. To start with though, Tom, next slide, please. I just wanted to home in a bit more on the travel trade, which is clearly really important for Wales to generate inbound tourism. We know that at least 35.8 million was generated for the Welsh economy in 2019 from a sample of circa 850 domestic and international tour operators. Next, please, Tom. And this summary from that annual travel trade research, which some on the call have kindly contributed to, shows, particularly with the arrows in the bottom left hand of the screen, shows a tracker group of 100 operators significantly increased the spend and bed nights to Wales between 2010 and 2019. And from the overall sample, which shows sort of general highlights, North Wales and Cardiff have proved most popular, with fairly equal spread across the rest of Wales in terms of visits. Next, please, Tom. I also want to briefly mention the strategic context now, before we go on to some further insights. We launched a strategy just before COVID really hit, and that still provides a clear sense of direction for the longer term for Wales. Next. In the meantime, we published a recovery plan back in March, and that really will sort of provide a bridge back to our strategic plan. Within it is the ambition to bring back international visitors to pre-COVID levels within at least 2 years, with actions being taken to undertake and support the return of inbound business. Next. So 3 S's underpin our strategic approach, which is focused on extending the season, increasing spend and spread. Next, please, Tom. And next again. So Tom showed some figures. If you can just go back one, Tom.
Right. Ah. Probably beyond my. Oh, sorry. Let's see if I can.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, that's it. Hold on. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, yeah. So Tom showed the 2019 figures, and you did reference, Tom, there are obviously, because of the sample sizes for you know, Wales in particular, and the low base sizes, we do have to consider whether the IPS data is, you know, is subject to a bit lower reliability than we'd like. So what we tend to do is we use 3-year averages to interpret the longer term trends. So this is actually the 3 years in the run up to the pandemic, but it does mirror really Tom's slide in terms of markets by trips. Next, please, Tom. But when you look at the spend, so this is the markets that are both in the top 10 for visits and for spend. So it shows the highest spend markets pre-COVID. And, you know, I mean, as Tom says, obviously some of that traffic is passing through, but this is spend that is believed to have come into Wales as part of that. So it shows, you know, the significance really for us of the US market in particular. Next, please. So we've worked with Visit Britain, Scotland and London to commission this inbound sentiment tracker with consumers throughout COVID. And I just wanted to go through a few of the key points. These are from the latest set of published data, which was does date back to September. So obviously, you know, doesn't reflect the absolute current situation, but it gives an idea of you know, direction of travel and interest. So in terms of age groups, the interest in Wales is fairly more evenly spread across age groups compared to some of the other nations. And we know that potential visitors to Wales are more likely to have previously visited Britain several times. Next, please, Tom. There's a high level of interest for all destination types among Wales potential visitors. That possibly reflects the lower awareness of what Wales offers, but we do think it's a good opportunity to really promote exploring different aspects of the country. Next. So travelling with a spouse or partner is the most popular option across all the nations. However, Wales records a stronger interest amongst families with children, and travelling alone or with friends are also substantial segments of potential visitors. Next. Those wishing to visit Britain and Wales are still considering a range of accommodation experiences, including hotel chains and boutique properties, but also B&Bs, historic houses and private rentals. Next, please. And those interested in visiting Wales are more likely to be interested in history and heritage, outdoor nature, experiencing local life, self-driving and guided tours, outdoor activities and sports. Next, Tom, please. So, Diolch, thank you. That's it from me just for now, but I'm going to hand you over to Joss Croft from UK Inbound.
Thank you very much, Claire, and good afternoon to everyone. So quick update from me, just in terms of where we are. So actually September and October, I think there was a growing confidence in amongst a lot of my members in terms of what 2022 was going to look like. And there was strong demand. Of course, these were only inquiries, there weren't firm bookings at that point. But as we approached the back end of November, we'd had a very busy world travel market, and obviously Visit Wales also participating with us and through us on that one as well. But I think it's really when we started to hit news of Omicron that we really started to get an additional shudder through the travel industry. So on the 26th of November, we had the red list, where we had 6 countries added to the UK's red list. And then an additional 5 were added to that pretty shortly. That meant effectively that people from those 11 countries could not travel to the UK. And then on the 30th of November, we had the announcement that the government was going to implement a PCR test. These are the tests that allow you to identify the strain of the variant, but that everyone would have to take a PCR test no matter which market they were coming from on or before day 2. And it really was at that point that the tap was turned off, because a real worry for people that they were going to get stuck in market and of course the cost and hassle. We may hear a little bit more from our other two speakers on that later on. And then from the 7th of December, anyone travelling to the UK also needed that pre-departure test as well. That could be a lateral flow or a PCR, but it needed to be taken before people arrived. Now, these restrictions have, as I say, they've very much turned off the tap. The reason why the day 2 was put into place by all 4 nations of the UK was to prevent Brits from being stuck overseas. But of course, that applies to international visitors who would be stuck in the UK. So that day 2 PCR test is a real issue for us. The next date for the next review is actually tomorrow, when those restrictions are due to be reviewed by the UK government. It tends to be that all 4 nations do adopt a similar approach in terms of border restrictions. So I'm imagining that whatever happens tomorrow will also apply to Wales. I have to say that I don't think anyone is anticipating, particularly with the rise of Omicron in amongst the UK community transmission population, that we're going to see any changes whatsoever tomorrow. However, the next review date is the 5th of January. And I think we're a little bit more positive that we may hear news of the removal of some of those restrictions, given that a lot of the restrictions were to halt the entrance of Omicron into the UK. And as the WHO would tell you, hard borders doesn't stop the transmission into a country. So now there is no reason for us to be doing the PCR test on day 2 now that there is such high community transmission within the UK. It was desperately unfortunate, as I say, because 86% of my members have received cancellations following that news in late November, and we really need to see some of these restrictions removed on the 5th of January so that we can then start to look for the key booking periods of January to March, given that half of all visitors travelling to the UK think about their trip 6 months in advance. So they need to be sure that they will be able to come here without some of those restrictions. As I say, it's massively disappointing given that there is still a lot of demand out there. And again, we'll hear from our other speakers, but people are still very, very keen to travel to the UK. But it is these restrictions and indeed some of the reporting of the case numbers in the UK, the removal of ID cards, and various other challenges, but there is still strong demand to travel to the UK. So we were making cases to be made about the restrictions needing to be lifted. Obviously, the Wales government have recently announced a fund, and the Scottish government again today announced a further fund, and we're waiting for the UK government to put its hand in its pocket for some of the England-based operators who will need that support to get them through until the main season as well. It's also worth just touching for a second around why the travel trade are so important. 62% of all the people that come to the UK use a tour operator of some sort or other. That might be an online travel agent, that might be a more traditional operator as well. We know that 77% of people coming from China, over 50% from Germany, and over 50% from the USA are traveling to the UK using a tour operator. And we also did a study that looked at, we got responses back from 92 of our tour operators, and they carry 11 million visitors to the UK. So roughly 1 in every 4 of the passengers that arrives in the United Kingdom, and I would imagine for Wales it would be stronger actually, is booked through the DMCs. So I'm going to pass back to Tom now, and maybe we can hear from some of those DMCs that are bringing in, as I say, roughly 25% of all the people that travel to the United Kingdom as well. So Tom, over to you. I hope that's useful for everyone.
Thank you, Joss. Indeed. Look, we've got these 2 people here. I think we really need to start hearing from them. And I would just like to ask, really, Vera to start off with. And I appreciate you've got, huge experience both in Germany, which I suppose must still be your principal market, but also United States. What experience have you got of selling Wales, and what was popular, And how did you go about it? I mean, almost tell us what you do, I suppose.
Well, thank you, both of you. I mean, just for the intro as well, what we do and how important we are for the industry. I think for us, I mean, it's not only US and Germany, it's also France, the Netherlands, Italy, Spain. I mean, we operate in, or we work with over 40 source markets. And I mean, Claire and I have been working for the last 5 years very closely together, and also her team, I mean, Stephen in the US, for example, and the team in Germany. And I remember very fondly that Joss and I took a car with Stephen together at a Wales Tour Wales conference, and we drove from Cardiff to Llandudno. And I have to say, it's what a beautiful, wonderful country it is. And I think, yes, we have sold and promoted Wales in the past. I think the biggest challenge has been that, I mean, Wales has been focusing a lot on domestic travel and not really been shouting out in the world a lot about what it has to offer and what beauty is out there. And as Tom, you mentioned it earlier, I mean, you see that the north of Wales and the Cardiff area are very much populated or have the most tourists when it comes to it. And that's related to accommodation as well. So what we have seen in the past, we have seen mainly Wales being part of a combination tour. So whether some groups have come or individual travelers have come from the southwest of England and then just drove over the border, or have flown into Manchester or Liverpool and then driven over the borders in order to visit Wales for a few days. And as you, I think you mentioned it, one of your statistics earlier, a lot of our US citizens use it as access point to go then to Ireland. So it's also, again, a combination tour. And I think I combine it, I compare it always a little bit. When you speak, I'm German. When you speak about Germany, everyone thinks about a giant glass of beer, which is very typical for Bavaria. Bavaria has been amazing outside in the world promoting themselves, whereby the rest of Germany, I mean, where I'm from, Cologne, we have very small glasses. So everyone is really surprised when they come to other parts of Germany and have really small beer glasses. And I compare this a little bit to Wales. Wales has been very almost shy in shouting how amazing Wales is. And when you look at what Wales has to offer in terms of history, culture, food and drink, nature, the coastline is fantastic. I think most people in the world would have no clue and no idea what Wales has to offer. And that has been our experience. Whenever we're speaking to clients, it's almost like you have a first touch conversation with the clients, if that makes sense. So Claire and I had pulled together beginning of 2020 a detailed activity plan, what we wanted to achieve in order to promote Wales through our channels, because we have the warm contacts in the source markets. But unfortunately, the pandemic didn't allow us to roll any of that out, really.
Yeah. Adam, I mean, just out of interest, what's your experience of selling Wales in Asian markets? I mean, was there anything in particular that was popular?
Yeah, first I should perhaps point out I'm not the greatest expert on Wales. I am a quarter Welsh, and we used to holiday in the early days in Abersoch in northwest Wales. But obviously, Mickey is a global operator. We deal with FITs, as I said, globally. In the group segment, it's predominantly Japanese and more latterly a lot of Asian groups from China, Indonesia, Thailand, etc. And so we deal with, for groups, we deal with a land arrangement for the whole of Europe. Obviously, UK is one of the most popular destinations countries there. It's not the number one for either of these markets. Italy, France tend to be the top two. But UK, we've focused a lot on UK over the last few years very successfully. And obviously, in conjunction with that, Scotland, Ireland, Wales all have come very much into focus, and we've obviously been trying to diversify. As someone mentioned, I think it was Claire in her presentation, spreading the business, spreading the markets, seasonality, etc., is all very important. So for us, yes, we've certainly looked at these destinations, including Wales, how we can diversify Up to now, I think we've had generally good feedback, but admittedly it's relatively small. I think the Asia segment accounted for about 10 or 11%, if I remember correctly, from the stats. But our success to date has been very much similar to what's been mentioned previously, often arriving into Cardiff and doing some sightseeing, etc. in Cardiff, and of course the northern part. Conwy is particularly popular in the Japanese market. I believe it's twinned the castle there with Himeji Castle in Japan. So there are connections there, and we've certainly seen a lot of interest over the years in Conwy and that area, Llandudno. A little bit Snowdonia and Brecon Beacons, but you know, Conwy and Cardiff have really been the prime destinations. And most of those, or many of them for the Japanese, certainly they've been coming in and staying very often in Chester, which we'll perhaps get into a little bit more shortly, but due to the problems of accommodation in the northern part of Wales, I think that's been the biggest drawback. But we have had a degree of success with this, and we very much tried to engage with you know, the local entities, you know, Visit Wales, obviously in this case, and some of the other nations. And I think studying the product available, engaging with the agents to build new itineraries. I think very much from over the last 2 or 3 years, going back obviously pre-COVID, what we were hearing very much from our customers in Japan, and by customers I mean the travel agents in both Japan and the rest of Asia, was that their clients were very much looking for new experiences, new destinations and new experiences. So a lot of the sort of grand tour of just doing the capitals, a lot of that's been achieved by people now, and they're certainly looking for something different in terms of where they visit and what they do once they get there. And I think for a more of a niche market like Wales, I think one of the critical things is engaging with the right travel agents in Japan. And I think that's where the operator's role is vital. You could go and make a very expensive sales call, for example, to somewhere like Japan and see some major travel agents, but potentially have very little business arising from that. You know, there are key agents like WOZ, World Air Service, and ANA Hello Tours, and they very much focus on repeat business, very often slightly older clientele, slightly more financially well off, and therefore with more money to spend. And they are particularly very often smaller groups, 8-10 rooms, which I think again lends itself to the situation that we face in Northern Wales in particular. So I think that focusing on the agents that target the right clientele, I think is particularly important with a destination with limited hotel capacity, as in North Wales especially.
Well, thank you, Adam. I think it was really interesting how you placed it in the context of a European inbound offer when it comes to the Far East. The first thing they see is Europe as a region. Then they're thinking, you know, should we go to Italy? Should we go to France? Should we go to the UK? And Wales, it has to fit itself in within that product offer. And at the moment, it's, as Vera has said, it's not easy to get your voice heard, particularly if you're underappreciated and under-recognized. But within the context of trying to fit yourself in between the people looking at Paris or Venice or Rome or Switzerland, it's a doable feat, but it's you've managed to show quite how big the task is to get Wales known and recognised in these markets.
Yeah, but I think we'll go perhaps into that a little bit more later on, but there are opportunities, as I said. I think people are looking for something somewhere different, you know, something new. And I think I don't have any stats, but I would guess that the satisfaction rating of first-time visitors to Wales from whether it be the Far East or other parts of the world is relatively high. I think once they're there, they enjoy what Wales has to offer. But for example, in our case as a tour operator, the decision is made by the travel agents in Japan and Asia. So we have to engage with them. We have to suggest new itineraries. We have to suggest a product or somewhere where to stay, a manor house hotel or whatever that can make that itinerary more appealing. But it's up to them to then agree with that and invest in promoting it, etc.
Right. I'm just intrigued. I mean, we've touched on difficulties. I think it might be worthwhile dwelling on those just for a few moments. Vera, are there any particular difficulties you encounter when you're trying to sell Wales? What are the big obstacles?
I think, I mean, you mentioned accommodation already, which I think is very crucial if you organize a tour and want people to stay for longer than just for a short stint. They need to stay somewhere overnight. And whether that's small B&Bs for individual travelers or smaller hotels, or whether it's bigger hotels for group business. And now with the ICC in Newport, I mean, obviously there might be a few more hotels around there for bigger groups. But if you want people to stay in Wales, I think accommodation is a key point. Access point is another one. I mean, you have some airports surrounding. I mean, you have an airport in Cardiff, but which international airline is going there? Then I mean, it's good always to understand if you want a certain source markets, they need to get somehow to Wales. Or you have in the north, you have Manchester, for example, as access point, which is very useful as well, just to name a few. I think when I joined Joss and Claire at this conference, I think it was 3 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, I lost track of time. I think it's very important to understand how the trade works, because I mean, for us, and how the booking patterns work. So looking at Germany as an example, in normal times, the booking patterns are about a year and a half before arrival, they would book their trip, but they can cancel everything up to a month before arrival. So I think there's a risk carriage in there, but I think we need to obviously find a way how we partner with each other, how the promotional cycle works. Some of these big German or other markets like France, Italy, big tour operators, they produce brochures yearly. So you need to ensure that you're in that brochure, because otherwise you will not be sold. I think these are challenges, and we found that a lot of the businesses we've spoken to, and it's not only Wales, it's also other parts in the UK, are a bit overwhelmed with how to work with the trade and how a commission model works, or something like it. And I think Claire and her team, as well as Visit Britain, have done a great job starting to educate and to speak to suppliers to really say, this is how you need to structure your price model, as an example. This is how you can work with the trade. This is how it works. Other than that, I think it's our job, and I wouldn't call this as a negative thing. It's our job. If we package a tour, we give idea givers out into the market. So that's our job. And I think the product or the supplier don't even need to do much about this anymore. Maybe support us with more information about their product and maybe images or something like it. But the rest would sit with us. It's just like I think it's a hand-in-hand approach, really. And in addition, sorry, I felt that we as DMCs have not been much included. So some suppliers tried to do their own promotions, but it was maybe a lot of effort and great promotions as well, but they went into nowhere because they didn't have the right channels to use. And I think we've seen this in the rest of Britain right now, and in the UK right now, where we've started to really partner up. And I think we will show the results of this will be much stronger, obviously, because you think with one voice and go together strongly out there. Because for a client, wherever in the world, or for a customer, they don't understand how all this is structured. They arrive here and see a country, so they don't know who is involved and how. They just want to go there and have a seamless experience. And I think the more it is important that we give that to them. Thank you.
No, thank you, Vera. I mean, what difficulties did you encounter? Any difficulties, Adam?
I think initially, of course, you know, there is probably still a certain lack of knowledge. So I think that's the first barrier. It's vital that the promotion, the general promotion of Wales as a destination, and then the various regions is brought, you know, higher into people's the travel agents' consciousness. I think. So I mean, you know, understanding the market, the product, what it has to offer, I think is critical. But on a more practical level, as I touched on earlier, for us, Cardiff has been generally no problem with regards to accommodation. But as soon as you try and place the groups in Northern Wales, particularly in Conwy and that area, then it's really challenging. You know, there are not many hotels large enough to take reasonable size groups, and a lot of the Asian groups tend to be of a reasonable size, you know, 20 rooms, for example, not 6, 8, 10 rooms. And so there's a general sort of lack of availability. And then on top of that, of course, you're competing with the domestic market, and the domestic market in summer is very strong, and that's when a lot of the Asian groups want to travel as well. In winter, you know, a certain amount are closed, of course, but so it's availability, but also the actual conditions. You know, understandably, depending on the nature of the property, they're looking to protect themselves. I mean, Vera just mentioned, I mean, the Japanese and a lot of the Asian markets actually book quite late. We reserve the hotels quite early, but the actual customers book quite late. And again, they can cancel, you know, historically, they can cancel up to 1 month prior. So these conditions are quite, you know, if hotels, for example, are requiring deposits or non-refundable deposits quite early, that's a real challenge for the operator. So I think general availability and the conditions that understandably they seek to protect themselves with, these throw up and represent barriers to the tour operators. And we've historically found that one of the biggest problems in trying to place business in Northern Wales.
Yeah, I think the point you're making really has to be emphasised. Both the scheduled operators, those are the people who put together programs and print them in brochures, or used to print them in brochures, advertise them on the web, and run, for instance, group tours on a regular basis. They will be planning their 2020, most of their plans for 2023 will already be well advanced, and they're about to go out and place the bookings for 2023 in the forthcoming months. Indeed, the event that Joss and I are putting on at the Britain and Ireland Marketplace at the end of January is partly there to enable those tour operators who are putting programs together to place their 2023 business. And so that's the planning cycle you're looking at. I think from speaking from a slightly superannuated North American operator, which is what I was many years ago, it was really interesting. We were looking at, could we do a Wales tour? We did Scotland tours, we did Germany tours, we did tours in the Netherlands, and could we do one of Wales? And the answer is we couldn't really do one of Wales. Or if we were doing a tour of Wales, we couldn't do it in Wales. We were basically driving up through Wales and then staying in England, which is where the hotel accommodation was, particularly for Central Wales and North Wales. And this is something that sort of hampers the brand image. Now, I know, Claire, you've been listening to us harping on. I don't know if you want to reply to any of this. I'll hand over to you for a minute, and then over to Joss, perhaps. Claire, is there anything happening on that front?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I mean, you know, we've actually seen a sort of heartening amount of product development continue in spite of COVID. So, you know, for example, we had a new hotel open up last year, the Hilton Garden Inn in Snowdonia. There are other, you know, sort of smaller scale developments, more boutique developments that have gone on in North Wales. And we're also seeing in the south, we've got new hotels opening for groups. So, for example, next year, the Celtic Collection, which is affiliated with the Celtic Manor resort, which many of you will know, they have a brand called Tea Hotels, and they're opening a Tea Milford waterfront hotel next year in Pembrokeshire. And the tea brand specifically is designed to cater for groups. Now, still, we're talking about the south of Wales, I know, with that particular one. They've also opened recently the Parkgate Hotel in Cardiff. There are other developments coming in Newport as well. As you say, I think both Vera and Adam, you've really, I think, highlighted one of the biggest challenges is up in North Wales, where it's where access in and out, as you say, from places like Chester and Liverpool does make that perhaps, as things stand, more attractive. But we obviously, for us, it's very much about increasing the bed nights in Wales, because the more the more that people stay over here, then the more can be programmed in around the stays. So it's not only the impact from an economic point of view, but it's the fact that we can showcase more of the destination. And we've got a brand new World Heritage site, the Slate Landscape of North Wales, which takes in the best part of Snowdonia, really. So that we've got some great products to promote and sell. So I think, Vera, you mentioned the importance of partnership, and I think we very much see it as an opportunity for us to work together to try and I think bring back certainly the opportunity for inbound tourism, because inevitably that's not been where things have been in the last couple of years, but we would really like to see more opportunity for international visitors coming in, and to work with our supplier base here, including the destination management companies and inbound operators that we have in Wales, as well as companies like Vera and Adams, to really get that pipeline back up and running, really. But yeah, certainly there are opportunities for developers, and hopefully perhaps the opening of some of these other hotels will show others that there is an opportunity here. Yeah.
Can I throw in just one additional comment there on with regards to when they stay in, for example, Chester or Liverpool, you then open up the issue of the driver's hours as well, because obviously if they're coming in from outside, coming up from Cardiff or from the south, or they're coming in from Chester, whatever, they're already consuming some of the necessary driving hours. So that's one additional problem. And the other one, just very briefly going back to the hotel accommodation, in many Asian countries now, they have quite stringent travel laws. So it's really necessary, once the wholesaler or operators provided the name of the hotel, they have to stick to it. Otherwise, the penalties can be quite punitive. So that makes it more difficult when you're dealing with smaller, more limited accommodation.
I think this is probably the principal barrier that we're facing. Just to give a slightly different twist on it, I mean, what's noticeable has been actually the increasing use of Wales by those people who are travelling through to get to Ireland. When I started many years ago, it was basically a sprint across Wales from Bath or Bristol to get over to Fishguard, or vice versa. And similarly, coming from Chester to get to Holyhead, you couldn't hang around, but with the advances in the A55, people now are able to stop in Conway. They are actually able even to stop in Carnarvon en route to Holyhead, and this means that there is money being spent there, if not bed nights. And similarly, I mean, we've seen a real rise in Cardiff being an alternative accommodation venue to Bath and Bristol, to those people travelling through that area. So things are improving on that front. But I think just to echo what Adam is saying, what we need are hotels that are largely reliant on corporate customers who are happy to take 1 night or 2 night bookings. If you've got people who are wholly reliant on leisure bookings, they're really looking for people to spend a week there. And that's a pretty tall order for, certainly for escorted group tours, to have a week-long booking in a hotel. It very, very rarely occurs. Joss, I don't know if you've got an angle on this as to what difficulties you perceive that might be overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Wales has got absolutely what international visitors to the UK want. A lot of the time, as Vera says, the problem is that they don't know about it. You know, Wales has got the experiences. People are moving much more towards experiential tourism where they can participate in local culture. They feel that they're in a different place, different to England, but different to where they come from. So I think some of it is around getting, excuse me, the Wales brand out there. Now, a lot of the time when you do brand marketing, that costs so much money because you're talking about TV, you're talking about print, you're talking about radio, cinema, or video on demand, all of those. But I think where Wales has a good advantage over other parts in England is the fact that you have Visit Wales on your side. You have a professional team in terms of Claire, who's working with these operators on a day-to-day basis. Again, we heard earlier, I think it was from Vera, no, it might have been from Adam actually, that, you know, making sales calls yourself to go out to these overseas markets when you're not necessarily going with bookable packaged product may not deliver the returns that you want. So working closely through Claire and through the Visit Wales team and directly with the Veras and the Adams of this world, as Vera said, she deals with 40 different source markets. You have a contract with Tour Partner Group. You know, that's 40 markets that you don't have to visit, much as potentially you might quite like to as individuals. From a return on investment perspective, getting Vera and getting Adam to do that work of selling in your product into the destination is an ideal way to get the route to market. I think the other challenge, and we spent a lot of time talking about the availability of accommodation here. One word of caution is that it was in November that people around the globe started to think less about domestic tourism and more about international tourism. Now, from an inbound perspective, that's good because people are looking to come to the UK, but also a word of caution is that those people are so heavily reliant upon English or domestic business may well be looking to travel internationally this year, and maybe they haven't been doing that in 2020 or 2021. So do keep your portfolio as balanced as you can by having international somewhere within that mix, because these are the people that are spending 3 times on an overnight trip than domestic visitors do as well. So I guess key message would be partnership. We've heard it before, work in partnership with Visit Wales, but also partnership with the operators, because yes, you will have to pay a commission, but that if you don't sell anything, you don't pay the commission anyway. It allows you to manage your business at the times of year that you need it, with the types of customers that are going to be bringing in that high value spend that you and the local areas are going to be needing as well. So I think kind of partnership and working with and through Visit Wales would be my key messages, Tom.
Thank you. Well, very well put. Now, I'm just going to put Adam and Vera on the spot very quickly. What do you think the big opportunity for Wales is in the forthcoming years, and look over a 5-year period? And I suppose allied to that is, or related to that, is what would you do if you were a Welsh supplier? How would you go about selling yourselves? I think Joss has partly answered that question, but I mean, if you've, what would you do if you were an attraction in Central Wales? How would you go about getting yourself on people's agenda? Vera, why don't you start while Adam is
well, I mean, Joss stole some of my words already, but thank you for that. But I think he would be, I mean, make use of us. I mean, we are here. I mean, it's like when I joined the conference with Claire together and Joss a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm happy to have conversations. I mean, our product team is happy to have conversations and also giving advice, and there's no charge or anything for it. That's why we're sitting in the same boat. I mean, we are very excited and happy if we have amazing product to sell. And I think what is really important as well, I mean, to understand what product actually do you have to sell, and then maybe get some advice of how you can sell it and what you maybe need to do in order to sell it internationally. But also understanding the source markets you are catering to and setting your own expectations right. I mean, for example, a US client would potentially not stay a week and beach holiday in, or very sure will not stay a week at a beach holiday in Wales. They ideally want to tick off as many countries they can on one trip. They come for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they might do Wales, and they see everything as an individual country. They do Wales, England, Scotland, Ireland, and then maybe hop over to Paris, Germany, and some other markets just to say when they come back, oh, we've been to 14 countries. But I think the key message is there. If you have a German, for example, they would maybe stay 3-4 days if they have accommodation and they have availability to stay in that area. So I think thinking about who you targeted to, but also, do you want to promote to individual travelers or do you want to cater for a group? Then you obviously need to have a different offering. Understanding the different buying cycles. When are source markets buying? When do you need to engage with a DMC or a tour operator in order to get your product out? And I think what Josh said as well, I mean, it doesn't need to be straight through us. I work very closely with Claire. I work very close with Stephen in the US, for example. I think we can also channel the communication. We can host webinars for you in order to explain how we work as a first step, maybe. And I think the product in Wales, or what Wales has to offer, and that's what I see as a prediction, I think it's actually what the entire world is talking about right now. You have nature, so you have fresh air, which is in COVID times even more important than ever. You have an absolute, I repeat myself right now, an absolute fantastic coastline. You have beautiful food and drinks. You have unique experiences which you can do, which a lot of people are, especially the experiential experiences right now. You have history. You have, I mean, I stayed in, sorry for my pronunciation, Roch Castle in Pembrokeshire. That was maybe totally off. Sorry about that. And it's like a fantastic experience. You stay in a castle overnight. I mean, it's more a unique individual traveler product, but there is accommodation for that kind of clientele is there. And they have done a great job being a bit more present out there. So they're very active on social media. They're very active, but you need to obviously have the right client base on social media as well. Otherwise, it goes into nowhere. Attending trade shows, sales calls have been mentioned a few times. And I mean, there's no harm if you have budget to spend to join some of our teams on a sale call, develop a product together or an itinerary together where you're featured, and then go out together and present. But it can also be done through Visit Wales, for example. If Claire or one of her team, Judith, for example, could come on trips and present a bigger portfolio of products, for example, what Wales has to offer. I think for us, it's not a new way of working. We have a lot of experiences working with Visit Britain, Visit Scotland, Tourism Ireland, or others in the world. And I think just the offer is out there. Make use of us. We're here, and I think I speak on Adam's behalf as well. But I'll let you speak now, Adam. Sorry.
No, I would echo much of what you've just said there, Vera. I think just to add, though, I do think there are opportunities now, and that timing, as in most things in life, is crucial. And as Josh touched on, the staycations popularity, my guess is that next summer will still be quite strong, but gradually as things develop, then the Brits will seek to go abroad again, and this will open up availability much more for international travelers. But the problem is, if you wait too long, once the business does start to recover, then you'll find the operators with their depleted resources will find it very difficult to go into promote invest strategy. They'll be hands-on, operating. So I think that work has probably got to be done now so that it can bear fruit, over the next couple of years. Timing, I do think it is critical. And again, I'd echo, you know, the coastline, a lot of outdoor activities. I mean, the Japanese, for example, like trekking, you've got Snowdonia for walks, etc. So I think there's a lot that can appeal. And I think it's obviously working. You're very fortunate to have the resource with Visit Wales, including representation in some of these overseas areas, and you have to use those to maximum effect. But I think there are opportunities now, combined with what I said earlier, that agents and customers are looking for new destinations and new experiences. So you know, it's difficult, resources very stretched, but it's all about investing at the right time, I think.
Yeah. No, I would just echo what you said, and just to re-echo what I was saying earlier. And what you've got is unique in Wales, but it's you have got competition, particularly for some of those things which are your lead products. There are no doubt that people will be attracted to go trekking in Wales. They will be attracted by the coastline, but there are other destinations with coastlines, such as Scandinavia, chiefly Norway, and other destinations with trekking, such as Switzerland. Which may feature larger, may loom larger in the imagination of your potential clients. So you've got to find a way of making what you do unique and uniquely attractive. And this is something that I know Claire will be working on quite hard. Claire, is there any final word you would like to say?
Really, just to say diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much. You know, both to Tom and Joss for collaborating with us over many years, and Vera and Adam likewise, along with all of the other operators, DMCs and representatives of the travel trade that are so vitally important for us in terms of inbound international tourism. And you know, we really, you know, we appreciate that it's been a very difficult couple of years, and you know, continues to be challenging, but hopefully by working together and with our supplier base in Wales, and you know, showing them the way really that there is an opportunity here, that if we work together we can actually make the best of that opportunity for Wales. And you know, we really look forward to doing that in the year and years ahead. So diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you, Claire. I would just emphasize that this webinar has been recorded. It's going to be available on the website. You can source it through the Britain and Ireland Marketplace website, I'm sure. Don't forget that all the virtues of talking to tour operators, talking to intermediaries, is encapsulated in BIM, which is both going to be in person, we trust, we hope. It's going to be in person at the end of January, but it will also be online, and so there will definitely be an online version as well as an in-person version. But everything you heard today has been recorded, including, of course, all the slide decks that were presented at the beginning. So if you want to review them again, you can do so. I would like to take this opportunity because when this seminar is over, it shuts down very quickly, and I don't have any other scope to say thank you. I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to my co-panelists, Vera, Joss, Claire and Adam, who've given up their time today to discuss these points. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, audience, as well. I appreciate we've had nearly everybody who joined at the beginning has stayed right through to the bitter end. So that's that says a lot for your stamina, let alone our presentation. Just one last thought. I would say that notwithstanding some of the traps that are laid for us by government and indeed by fate and disease, when I was talking to my members in North America last week, they said that there were some people there who said that the bookings they had on their the bookings they'd received so far meant that 2022 looked even better than 2019. There is huge appetite for travel, particularly in the United States. And if we can allow these people to come over here, I know they will come and come in numbers. And what they're looking for is they're looking to tick off bucket lists, as Vera said, but they're also looking for experiences. And experiential holidays is a rather unfelicitous phrase, but unique experience is exactly what Wales can offer these people. So there's every grounds to be optimistic next year, as long as the secret police of our desires, which is Omicron, does not come and destroy it for us. With that thought, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for being here. Have a very happy Christmas. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Happy Christmas,
Happy
everyone.
Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Same to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.